Good tidings, Earthlings. We hope you brought your flamethrowers for this episode of League Unlocked because it's going to be a doozy as we begin the long summit and climb that is the top 20 player rankings at the World Championship. Obviously, leading up to, when Riot does their official one and everyone else around the globe is releasing theirs, we knew, everybody knows, this is the most difficult list that we've ever had to make in the history of the World Championship because there are so many stacked players around the globe coming to this year's Worlds that you are guaranteed. It doesn't matter if you think you've made the perfect list, you're leaving at least probably 10 players who are deserving of being in that top 20. So somebody and a lot of people are definitely missing out. We're taking in criteria here. We're looking at what they've done in 2019, specifically the summer split, and then you've also got to account a bit for that international experience and, whether or not they're a rookie coming onto this big stage or if they have played there before. So it's going to be very difficult. And the thing to remember is we're all friends here. You're not going to have the perfect list. There's going to be disagreements, and it's about being civil in how we argue who should be on there or who should not, in your humble opinion. That being said, before we get to the actual top 20 countdown, we've got to look at some of the guys who we left off the list who are still hands down and absolutely world-class talents, but there's just not enough spots to get them on to that top 20, and it's a large honorable mentions list. We're going through a couple of different roles for top laners. Khan and Wonder. Wonder, spoilers, is the only G2 member not in that top 20, and top laners as a whole, we only have 2 of them on the entire top 20 list, so it's definitely a role that is underrepresented compared to the other ones, but Khan and Wonder just on the outside looking in. Karsa and Svenskeren are a couple of junglers alongside Broxa. Broxa's probably the closest. You probably put him above the other 2. He's right there around that 21 position for this year's listing. But Svenskeren, that's the MVP of the LCS. The problem is all the junglers ahead of him would probably be LCS MVP as well. For mid laners, Chovy and Xiaohu, it's insane if you're looking at spring to think that Chovy would not be on this list, but he definitely had some moments in summer where he struggled quite a bit, especially in those playoffs. And Xiaohu was at an MVP level, but RNG stopped giving him attention and resources, so he's just outside. And then the bottom lane for Team Liquid, Doublelift. He seems to always be in that number 20 spot, but this time it is just a little bit too stacked in that top 20, and Core JJ, I think, would be above Doublelift. If you continued this countdown into top 30 or whatever you wanted, I think Core JJ should be the highest ranked North American player, MVP from the spring split, and he's still, I think, the most important member of Team Liquid. But those are just the guys who are honorable mentions. They didn't even get onto the top 20, which, that list alone is pretty stacked, and you're excited to see all of those players on the international stage. So the fact that they're not even in that top 20 just, again, proves to how stacked this talent pool is and how hard it's going to be to differentiate. But let's actually continue. Number 20, this is where some Fnatic members do actually make the list. Broxa did not get in, but we do have your boy Rekkles, who's obviously very familiar with the international stage. We have him ahead of Doublelift, and I think that's really because of the development that we've seen from Rekkles, being able to expand that champion pool. You saw in Season 8, he benched himself. He didn't even want to play any of these off-meta picks. Well, now he's all about that Karma, Garen, whatever you want to be seeing there. And I think he stepped up, especially in that summer playoff run. You heard G2, you heard Perkz specifically talking about how good that bottom lane for Fnatic was. It's the best that they've gone up against. And yes, they've played SKT. They've played Teddy, and it was Mata then at MSI. The playoff run was great from Rekkles. He really stepped up, and he really put away the question, oh, this guy can only play Karma. Can he ever go back to traditional AD carries? Well, of course he can, because, he played them for about the first 7 years of his entire career. We've seen very different variations of Rekkles, even just on Fnatic. You've seen where he's the focal point, the main carry in 2017. He took a step back for Caps here in 2018. And I think now he's kind of found that nice balance where he's able to be that super carry, hyper carry on Tristana or Xayah to step up, but he's also comfortable taking a back seat, and I think that just speaks to the overall diversity that we've seen out of Fnatic here in 2019, and I think a lot of that credit goes to Rekkles, and a lot more of that credit also goes to the man at number 19, his buddy in the bottom lane. It is Hylissang, who is one spot ahead of him, and I think Hylissang's a guy who can be underrated and overrated at the same time, which sounds a little bit insane. The tactical inting is something he said a while ago on the behind-the-scenes Fnatic show Life of Legends. He basically said someone has to be willing to engage and be that first man on the front lines to die for his team, and that's absolutely him for Fnatic. He's always a team-first guy. He will die so that literally anyone else on the team can survive. He's constantly helping out every other lane other than bottom lane. Yeah, he's left Rekkles in some 1v2 scenarios a couple of times here in 2019, but overall he has been huge for Fnatic, and anytime Hylissang doesn't have a good game is usually when they are getting absolutely raffle stomped in those ones. So he is a huge key cog for Fnatic in helping out both Nemesis, Whippo, and Broxah across the entire map, and I think he's got a pretty unique champion pool himself, and he's one of those star support players that you're almost a given to draw out 1, 2, maybe even 3 bans in any pick ban, and that's just something huge to bring to that team environment. So Hylissang and Rekkles both, I think, stepped up huge as a bottom lane, and they are the only members of Fnatic here in that top 20, but they both definitely deserve it. We talked about Broxah being just outside of this list, and Nemesis not on there. A lot of it to do because he hasn't had that international experience, because no, Rift Rivals doesn't count as an international event. But Nemesis has stepped up massively and was great for them throughout the playoff run. Basically, all 5 Fnatic members could probably be there between 19 and 30 on those lists. So they should be feeling pretty good heading into this World Championship. Coming up after the break, it is the East's team to make some noise here on the top 20. Yes, you know that there is a lot of them represented here. We are back here on League Unlocked, ladies and gentlemen. The countdown of the top 20 players at Worlds continues, and this is going across 2 episodes because there's so much to talk about. We're going to do 20 to 11 today, and then the top 10 in another episode, but we are on to number 18. It is the first player from the LCK, from Korea, and it is the remaining memory of the Jin Air Green Wings, since they are no longer in the LCK. We're talking SKT Teddy, who has thrived in his new team ever since he came over, and it's amazing that SKT is a whole lot better than the Jin Air Green Wings. And Teddy, at his highest points, has been, you're talking about the best AD carry in the world here on SKT, and really at his lowest points, you're talking about an incredibly consistent carry for SK Telecom. He was huge for them in the playoffs. You see that disgusting KDA of over 18? Well, they played 13 games in the playoffs, and in 8 of them, Teddy did not die a single time, including all 4 games against Griffin. That middle column was a perfect 0 for him, so you know his positioning is almost always on point for them. The damage numbers still upwards of 30, so it's not like he's just hovering around these team fights, not actually outputting the damage. He has fully been in the thick of things when it comes to these team fights, and anytime it's getting north of 30 minutes, even if there's mistakes made across the board from SKT in these team fights, you know that Teddy will be old reliable in the back line to clean up a lot of these fights. Really, the only negative you could say about him is maybe his champion pool isn't that deep. We've really only been seeing him play the Akali, or not the Akali, the Kai'Sa, the Ezreal, the Xayah, and what's the other one that I'm missing? I mean, the Varus. The Varus is what he's most known for almost this split. So really it's been those 4 champions that he has been running through the majority of the time, but you've seen him in solo queue, you've seen him throughout his career. He can play more than that, and I think that that champion pool will get diversified here at the World Championship, depending on what the meta ends up shaping to be. The main reason Teddy isn't even higher on this list is because he had all that hype coming into MSI, and I don't think he fully lived up to it as his first international tournament. So that's something that we're kind of accounting for here, is previous international events and just whether or not you're kind of a rookie. So that's why he's down at 18. He still deserves to be a top 20 player, absolutely, but that's why he's not higher or maybe even closer to that top 10. Number 17, as we roll on, another LCK player, the first and only member of Griffin, and if we're talking Griffin, it has to be Tarzan. We mentioned Chovy as that honorable mention, but the most important player for them is absolutely Tarzan, similar to what you see with Clid and SKT, where the early game is completely going to be run through by him, and if he is not performing to the incredibly high standard that he has set, well, then the team absolutely falters to a very noticeable amount. But the numbers from the regular season, absolutely disgusting, because SKT was mired in multiple slumps throughout that regular split. It was clearly Tarzan who was the best jungler in the LCK playoffs. Obviously, that head-to-head, Clid definitely came out on top. But the biggest thing and the biggest positive you could take for Griffin from that entire series against SKT is they were able to bounce back. They didn't just completely shut down mentally. You saw them get that one series or that one game win that was very dominant. I know there's not many positives to take from losing your third LCK title in a row, but there was that one positive, and they were competitive in at least the first couple of games against SKT. Game 4, we'll completely forget about. But the first two games, Griffin, they had their moments, they had their chances in those games. So I think Griffin should still have some confidence heading here into the World Championship. And Tarzan is a guy who earlier on in 2019, you'd be talking about top 5 maybe in a list like this. So he's fallen down to 17 because of some of the poor playoff performances that Griffin has had. If we go to the Sweet 16 now, it's the first member of the LPL from China. It is Invictus Gaming and TheShy in the top lane. IG, you talk about a slump for SKT. Well, IG's slump really almost cost them a World Championship berth. Needed all 10 games here in the gauntlet to even get here. But even when they were slumping, there were still moments where Shy was completely popping off. TheShy, pardon me, was completely popping off for IG. The solo kills, 28, is absolutely insane for a split. TheShy is what Zeros dreams to be from the Gigabyte Marines, but he's got to, die a whole lot less for that to happen. But obviously, TheShy is the premier top lane carry in the LPL and maybe even across multiple regions as well. 16 different champions was the most of all top laners here in China. You know that if you're not giving jungle attention to your top laner, TheShy is more than likely going to snowball a lead there. We don't want to be seeing this guy on any of that Karma top. Give him the Vladimir, give him the Akali, let him carry these games, because it's almost 2 full years now that we have seen him more than capable of doing just that. We know that Duke will be there, I assume, for Worlds to play some games because they love subbing him in, but TheShy is always the final raid boss to get through when it comes to Invictus Gaming, and a lot of their wins here in the gauntlet run to get them here was some hard carry performances from TheShy, and if he wasn't playing at the level that he was against JDG and TES, well, then you're probably not talking about IG even being here to defend their world title. So yes, TheShy is pretty darn important and well-deserving of that number 16 spot. In at number 15, we've got our second support on the list, and the man who is the ultimate bodyguard of the most important VIP in the world. It is Ming of RNG, who's always guarding Mr. President. That is Uzi. There's a reason that they have been looked at as one of the, top 3 bot lanes for the last 3 years, really, in the entire world, and that is because they work so damn well together. Ming is the absolute perfect support for Uzi, and he's the perfect support for RNG because he, like Hylissang as well, can get things going around the map. Yes, he's more often and more likely to spend his time in that bottom lane because we know RNG loves to play around Uzi. We know it doesn't matter what the meta is. He's going to be that main win condition, and old Mr. Ming is there to keep him safe. And this guy, is an absolute Iron Man. We talked about how many games he played in 2018. Obviously, he's played a little bit less here in 2019 because RNG was not at the midseason invitational. But this guy is absolutely tilt-proof. It feels like, I know he got pretty handily beat down by Crisp and FPX in that grand finals of the summer split in the LPL, but one little bit off series is definitely not enough to take away from all the positives that Ming has done throughout all of 2019. Still very deserving of number 15 on this list. Coming up after the break, it is time for the G2 members to make it into the top 20, and yes, there's going to be more than one of them here in the top 14. Hello friends, we are back on League Unlocked, continuing the countdown for the top 20 players at Worlds 2019, and you've waited long enough. It is time for some of them G2 members to make it onto the list. We're talking about the second best mid laner on the team, Perkz, aka Umajan, who has absolutely just completely shifted the landscape of the bottom lane here in the LEC and internationally. That's now 2 Game 5s where he's pulled out a Syndra in, series clinching games. Huge, high stakes. We knew the flex ability that he would bring, being able to play mages in the bottom lane, had the potential to completely take G2 to another level, and that is exactly what it has done for him. He and Mikyx have dominated a lot of the laning phases here throughout the regular season, although in those series against Fnatic, I think for the most part, save for, again, some of these Game 5 clinchers, it was Rekkles and Hylissang that were getting the better of them in that bottom lane matchup, specifically in the laning phase. But overall, and for 2019 in its entirety, obviously this roster swap has worked to a T. I mean, it's already exceeded what expectations anyone had. Perkz has fit in seamlessly to that AD carry role. Maybe early on in spring, you saw some signs of, okay, he's still kind of understanding how team fighting and positioning works in that role. But now I think he has fully figured it out. He's already able to compete at an international level, and he still has this added bonus of the Yasuo and the Syndra picks that he can pull out. I feel like Caps probably doesn't even practice Yasuo because there's no point. If it's being run in a G2 comp, you know it's going in the bottom lane, and you know that it's going to be Perkz who will be playing it. I'm very excited to see what kind of crazy picks they're going to come out with in the bottom lane here for G2 at Worlds. But Perkz, I don't think you should have any worries there. We've seen it in the laning phase, and more importantly lately, we've seen it in a lot of these team fights that he has been able to completely carry some skirmishes for G2. And one of the main reasons he can carry these fights is because of his buddy in that bottom lane, the man guiding him and holding his hand through the laning phase, Mikyx there, who you had the concerns around MSI with his wrist issues. He seems to have bounced back and dealt with it perfectly, or the coaching staff has helped him deal with it perfectly, and he has been on an absolute tear for G2. That's right, he's the 3rd best mid laner on G2 eSports, maybe the best Pyke, I don't know, it's hard to say, probably the best Pyke, but he has absolutely been one of the main reasons why we've seen this fast-forwarded development out of Perkz, him being there to help him and really across the map set things up, whether it's Vision with Jankos, roaming around the map with Caps, or just sticking to that 2v2 with Perkz and dominating in that fashion. Mikyx has been just incredibly important for G2, and on a roster that has so much star power, and coming into this year, I don't think you necessarily talked about Mikyx in the same star power, definitely not as somebody like Caps or Perkz or even Wonder or Jankos, but he has truly found his own footing here and kind of carved out his own storyline on this G2 squad, and he is incredibly important to absolutely everything that they do. He can play tons of different champions. We know he loves playing the Gragas, and that is something that you legitimately have to consider banning against G2 if it's a niche pick that's coming out in a best of series. So his champion pool just fits in perfectly with the rest of that G2 roster, where who knows what the hell this guy's going to play. It could be pretty much any of these flex picks that he's pulling out there. So he is a very important cog to the G2 war machine that has been absolutely bulldozing their way across the entire competition. Doesn't matter what region here in 2019. We're on to the dozen. The number 12 spot on this list. It's another LCK, the first member of Damwon, and one of the most exciting players that we may see at the World Championship, ShowMaker in the mid lane. We've talked about Damwon a lot in their debut year in the LCK. We know it's all about the top side of the map for them. ShowMaker has been so huge for them throughout the entirety of the split. He's been popping off in the laning phase, outside of the laning phase. The solo lanes for Damwon are absolutely their main win condition. We've seen ShowMaker, play a bunch of different champions, and even when games have seemed lost for Damwon, it has been him, with the contributions of Nuggery as well, where they have been able to completely get them back into these games. The numbers in terms of the summer split, right at the very top when you're talking about mid laners. And for a while, we were talking about Damwon as that best team in the LCK. We were talking about ShowMaker as taking that next step and being that next generation of mid laners alongside somebody like Chovy, where you're saying this is Korean mids, man. It's just like EU mids, where there's this new talent that always seems to come up, and then all of a sudden, within the first year or two, they were playing at an absolutely world-class level, and I think that's something we can get with ShowMaker. I think he could be higher on this list, but again, you've got to take into account that international experience that Damwon has very little of. Again, it's just the Rift Rivals that we're talking about, which we're not counting it, boys. We're not counting Rift Rivals as a huge international event, even the China versus Korea one, but I think ShowMaker is going to live up to the hype. I can't wait to see him completely obliterate some of these poor minor region mid laners here during the play-in stage. And for whatever team has the unlucky guess of getting Damwon as that third seed in their group, good luck, because that is going to be one of the hardest, probably the hardest third seed to match up against. But we're on to number 11. It is another support on this list from Fun Plus. We're talking about Crisp, the MVP of the summer finals, where he did definitely outclass Ming in that matchup. Him and LWX have been incredible as a bottom lane and the most underrated part of this Fun Plus lineup. There's a reason this guy was first team All-Pro when it came to the summer split in the LPL. He is exactly what you want in a support. And the fact that he was with this squad, Fun Plus, before they were even contending for playoffs, let alone contending for the number 1 seed in the LPL. He's been there for a long time with them. He's basically become a veteran leader on this squad. He's helped. There's a reason that LWX had such an incredible split. It's obviously his play, yes, is a huge factor in it, but also the help from Crisp that he's had there, because an AD carry only gets as far as their star support, and they've gotten pretty darn far as the FPX bottom lane. That's all the time today for League Unlocked. We will continue the countdown 10-1 on the next episode. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next time.